at the numbers that I have mentioned more than twice. It's highly likely that a bunch of them will be on the exam. Okay, now on to the problems. Problem set 6, problem 1. The investment savings framework. We have on line 1 our investment savings equation. And suppose that we know that the multiplier, this 1 over these denominator terms in the investment savings equation, is 1.5. And we have a responsiveness of exports to the exchange rate, a responsiveness of the exchange rate to the interest rate, and a responsiveness of investment to the interest rate. And then we're going to start asking questions. And the first of those questions is going to break one of the numbers I just gave you. Suppose that you take the responsiveness of the exchange rate to the interest rate and set it not at its value of 10, but at 0 instead. And ask what happens if the interest rate falls to 3%. What's going to happen to real GDPY in this particular equation? And I suppose I should start by going back to show you the equation, right? Our standard investment savings version of the income expenditure model. And then I guess go forward to show you what the potential answers are. Yeah? Oh, I'm going to give you the two equations, right? The key is to figure out what the terms mean, how to interpret it, and how to apply it. I don't want you to lose points because you forgot that there was a particular symbol in a particular place. Right? On the other hand, knowledge of the equation only works if, when you see the sucker, you're able to figure out what it means and why it's worth writing down. And that's not a terribly easy thing to do. Right. Okay. And before I embarrass myself, let's see that the answer is indeed what I thought it was, about 0.45. And we're up to 59%, getting 0.45, which is good if we give you all over a minute. How is it 45 billion? Well, work it through. Right? The only term in the investment savings equations that are going to change are going to be the terms involving the responsiveness of GDP to the interest rate and the responsiveness of investment to the interest rate, because we've set the responsiveness of the exchange rate to the interest rate at 0, which means that exports aren't going to respond to the changes of the interest rate. But if we write down those parts that depend on the interest rate and divide them by our multiplier terms, well, we then can plug in our multiplier of 1.5 from the last slide, and then plug in the parameters you're given for the sensitivity of investment to the interest rate, for the sensitivity of exports to the interest rate, and for the sensitivity of the exports to the exchange rate, and for the sensitivity of the exchange rate to the interest rate. Multiply through, substitute in the 3 percentage point drop in the interest rate, and get minus 30, that's plus 30 times 1.5, get plus 45. That's what we're looking at for the answer to 1A. For the answer to 1B, suppose we keep everything the same but change the responsiveness of the exchange rate to changes of the interest rate to 1. So that if the interest rate goes down by 1 percentage point, then the current value of the exchange rate goes down by 1 percentage point. It's as if people expect differences in the interest rate to last for about a year, and then to go away. If the interest rate falls by 3%, then what happens? Then what's going to happen to your real level of real GDP? And once again, perhaps, people seem to be answering much faster than I would if I were in your shoes. All right, so let's cut it short. And once again, to avoid embarrassing myself, yep, that's what I thought it was. And yeah, we're up to 63%. I'm getting it right. Okay, at plus 67.5. Why is that right? Why is that what we're looking for? Well, once again, work it through. You need the same terms from the investment savings equation by which GDP depends on the real long-term real risky interest rate, except this time you have some responsiveness of the exchange rate to the real interest rate rather than none. That means that you have 1,500 rather than 1,000 times the change in the interest rate in this equation, which means that your answer is going to be half again as big. It's going to be 67.5 rather than the 45 it was in part A. Yeah? This is how I do it. I'm just interested in the 67.5 at the bottom. Right. Yeah. This is just what I do. Yes? Yes. Although the arithmetic is simple enough here that basic calculator, at least I would find a basic calculator to be more a hindrance than a help. The likelihood my finger would slip and I'm just copying down an answer would be more likely to lead me wrong than I'd waste in time doing it by hand. But once again, that's a matter of taste. You all are 30 years younger than I am. Back when I started high school, in current today's dollars, adjusted for inflation, the price of a handheld calculator was 1,400 of today's dollars. A handheld calculator back then cost in real dollars 3 times as much as an iPad. And we thought it was really neat that it actually had an exponential key. We were kind of blown away. In fact, the most embarrassing nickname I ever had on my high school football team was being named after one of the brands of calculators, now long gone. Company completely bankrupt. You've grown up with these suckers. So your kind of brain to symbols interface is different than mine. And you should do what feels best to you all. Yeah? No, not as straightforward as one. Problem 1 was the most straightforward of the ones that we put up. Like I say, I don't think you do, but my interface is different with numbers is probably different than yours because I grew up in the dark ages when we had to walk uphill to school 3 miles both ways in the driving rain. Although there is a problem, right? I'm already surprised that there's not on sale somewhere on Telegraph Avenue a skin for a smartphone that makes it look like a 4-function calculator. And I think that we're going to have to move to either bare paper, pencil, and brain exams or simply make our exams open universe. Especially because Berkeley's Wi-Fi network doesn't crash very often these days. We could solve this by bringing in a microwave, disabling its safety circuits, and leaving it running with the door open, thus disabling Wi-Fi for 200 yards around during an exam. But I think if I did that in the classroom, there'd be lots of angry biologists coming by. And, besides, microwaves add energy to the water in your body, and it's not clear you want your water molecules heading for 212 degrees while you're taking an exam. It's not likely to be healthy. Problem 1C, we're continuing to march down through problem 1. We're changing the responsiveness of the exchange rate to the interest rate from 1. We changed from 0 to 1. We're now changing it from 1 to 5. Keeping the decline in the interest rates at 3%. What happens to y in this particular case? And by this time, it should be fairly straightforward. Let's see if I've actually gotten this right. You think it's positive. Okay, people are dividing between C and E. Yep, it's C, but it's positive. The answer is plus 157.5. And it is interesting because the question gave you a choice between minus 157.5 and plus 167.5. If you think that I've gotten an answer wrong, or that the question I've asked doesn't have a simple, easy, correct solution, a way to get double credit on it is to nail what you think is wrong with the question. It's worth writing that down if you think there's something wrong with the question. It's not worth spending, because it'll get you double points on that subpart of the question. It's not worth doing so if it'll take you much too long. Yeah? I may do that. It generated a bunch of discontent on problem set 5, but I think it's a fair thing to do. Right? Simply that if there's not enough information, it's then useful to be able to say there's not enough information here, but if I make assumption X, I get answer Y. We're not going to do that very often, right? Because there are 150 of you. There are 2 of us. That's, if each exam takes 10 minutes to grade, that's 1,500 minutes. That's 25 hours. That's 12 hours of our time on average spent grading the exams. And if we add tricky questions, they're the inputs that require more than 10 minutes to properly read and grade, so that it goes up from 10 to 15 minutes. Well, we're then imposing a 6-hour tax on each of us in terms of time that we could spend playing with our children, or I don't know what, watching first-run movies, or simply lying out in the sun, or going down to Half Moon Bay, or any of the other fun things we can do, instead of sitting probably in the basement of Doe Library without our smartphones, where there's nothing to do but grade, or go read books, which I've been known to do when I try to go to Doe basement simply not to get free from distractions. Too many books down there. And so it's very costly for us to make the questions too tricky. On the other hand, it's useful to you. To make the question somewhat trickier, so that you're engaging your minds as you try to think what's going on with them. Problem 1D, no, we did problem 1C already, 157.5. Problem 1D, we raise the responsiveness of the exchange rate to changes in the interest rate to 20, and if the interest rate falls by 3%, what happens to Y? This should be easy, given the patterns that we've established so far. Yep, and 77% of people nail B, which is the right answer. And we can work our way through it. And you'll notice what's happened as we've gone through A through D. We've increased the sensitivity of the exchange rate to changes in the real interest rate at home, and we've produced a steadily increasing effect of changes on the real interest rate on the level of GDP. That a more open economy in which the exchange rate is more sensitive to the interest rate is subject to much larger disturbances if the changes in the interest rate come from things happening to financial markets. And also the government, the central bank, can control things much more easily if it's the thing that's causing shifts in the real interest rate. 15 years ago, if you went to the International Monetary Fund or to the U.S. Treasury, back when I was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy, I would point to this trajectory and I would say, well, certainly you want to have capital markets, international capital markets, to be as open and as free of impediments as possible. You want money of all kinds to be able to flow around the globe in response to higher interest rates without hindrance, because wherever interest rates were high, it was a sign that profits were high, which is a sign that businesses are productive. And if there's a place where businesses are unusually productive, we want to make a lot more of them. We want to shift global economic activity to wherever businesses are most productive, and allowing finance to flow around the world quickly and easily is a way of doing that. And the question of whether this might in some sense be destabilizing or cause more trouble than it was potentially worth, our answer was no. We said financial markets, modern financial markets, appear to be relatively stable things. And anyway, a greater responsiveness of the exchange rate to the interest rate makes the central bank's ability to control the economy more powerful as well. What we did not think back in 1994 was perhaps central banks won't be powerful enough to stabilize the economy. And then in 1994-95, Mexico went into its financial crisis, and the Bank of Mexico proved to be not powerful enough to stabilize the economy. But the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Federal Reserve came in, and Mexico had a big recession, but not a depression in 1994-95. Then in 1997-98, the East Asia outside of China and Taiwan went into an actual depression, albeit a short one. But here the International Monetary Fund was able to come up with a whole bunch of money to stabilize the situation. That even though East Asian central banks couldn't manage it, together with the IMF they could. The U.S. Treasury was not in the game because then Republican Senator from New York, Alphonse D'Amato, prevented the Treasury from being so. Then came a Turkish crisis, and an Argentinian crisis, and a Brazilian crisis, and then a few years of relative peace and calm, and then the big global financial crisis. So this morning on NPR, I was listening to people in Bangkok talk about how they are sick and tired of having the free flow of capital into their country potentially destabilizing it. Because if anything happens to raise real interest rates in Thailand, which is now a very open economy, well, then the Thai economy is going to go into the toilet. And they don't like that. They would rather put big taxes on the money of people who come investing in Thailand in order to receive higher rates of interest, and so diminish the responsiveness of the exchange rate to the real interest rate, even though it means that businesses that are productive will have a somewhat harder time getting funding. The Thai government thinks that's worthwhile. Simply because a world in which exports respond to the exchange rate, which responds sensitively to interest rates, is a world in which shocks to your domestic financial market can absolutely destroy your economy. Brazil is also on the same side. More and more countries are on that same side. And recently the International Monetary Fund, which used to be the flag bearer for open capital movements, has said, well, gee, maybe we need to think again. And at this point, I should apologize to Columbia University professor Jagdish Bhagwati, who in 1998 wrote an article in Foreign Affairs, attacking me for being an unrealistic and unenlightened booster for open capital mobility without understanding what the risks were. And I dismissed Jagdish then 12 years ago as not understanding how well-constructed and stable modern financial markets were. Jagdish, I was wrong. You were right. I should have listened to you 12 years ago. That's what problem 1E is trying to get at. That when you have a more open and flexible capital market allowing money to slosh across national borders more easily, making exchange rates more sensitive to changes in interest rates, you increase the instability of an economy. And that's probably a bad thing to have. Moving on, we had problem 6, where we go back to the simple income expenditure model. Y equals C plus I plus G plus net exports, which are the difference between gross exports and imports. Consumption spending having a baseline term that depends on consumer confidence, and having a income term that depends on after-tax income. And then imports are simply proportional to real GDP. Stepping back from the investment savings version of the income expenditure model to the bare thing itself, and asking you what happens. What is real GDP for various measures of these autonomous spending flows and of these kind of multiplier parameters? And 2.5. Let me see if I can get the answer in my head. Fast enough. Yep, 22.5, we're up at a good plurality. And I say if you have 3 minutes to do this rather than 30 seconds, it's considerably easier. I don't think it's worth going through it in more detail. Right? That is, you've seen this before, you simply find the multiplier, you add up the 4 components of autonomous spending, you multiply them by the multiplier, and you're done. Similarly for 6b, different parameters, different values for autonomous spending, a different multiplier, and a different total in terms of the spending flows that don't depend on the level of income. Let me see. And I very much hope that the answer for this is 44. I very much hope it's E. Let's see if I was right. Yep, or at least I thought I was right when I did it earlier. Problem 6C, same general setup. But once again, different parameters for the determining multiplier and different components of autonomous spending. Okay. Okay, for this you should get a multiplier of 1.33, an autonomous spending of 10.5, and so an answer of 14. That's worth doing. And yeah, 14. And the last one of these, still yet another set of parameter values. And yep, 64% get the right answer, number A. With these parameters, we have a multiplier of 1.5 and autonomous spending level of 10.5. I think that's good. I think that you overwhelmingly have the knowledge and the ability to do the questions that are going to be on problems that are going to be on the midterm, just not quite fast enough to do it if I'm only willing to give you 30 seconds for each subpart in this particular framework. And you won't be restricted to 30 seconds right, on the midterm. Now, we're also going through the national income and product accounts. The national income and product accounts right, are fair game. That's part of what's going to be on the midterm. It's not economic growth. We've covered it. It belongs there. And figuring out just what is and what is not in this thing that is real GDP is a good thing to have in your brain. And it's something that I think you don't get enough of in Econ 1. So I did a little bit of it here. And here we have the sale for $25,000 of an automobile that cost $30,000 to manufacture, but had then been produced here at home last year and carried over in inventory. So since it was carried over in inventory, there was $30,000 in inventory investment last year, and the production of the car showed up as the creation of $30,000 in real GDP last year. This year, say, let's suppose oil's gone to over $100 a barrel, and this was a gas-guzzling car, so nobody really wants it anymore. One of these, terrified. I went to a ride with my daughter this morning on our way to Acalanes High School in suburban Lafayette. And the cars the seniors were driving to school had changed. 2 years ago when I was driving her, the cars the seniors were driving from school were either the really old things where you'd scratch your head and say, how does a car in California get that much rust? Or they were the small, cute things from parents who value, right, who really want to show their children they're willing to spend lots of money on them. Today, they were behemoths, right? They were SUVs. They were minivans. They were large cars. Over the past 3 years, the assembled upper-middle-class suburban parents of Lafayette, California have decided, Jesus, let the kid drive the gas guzzler to school. Let the senior kid drive the gas guzzler to school. We're taking the more efficient car and using it to drive to Berkeley or San Ramon or Marin or San Jose or the city or wherever because we just can't afford gas mileage. With that much, taking the gas guzzler on a long trip when gasoline prices are this high. I mean, my wife and I had our first $40 fill-up in a Prius over the weekend, which was not something I thought I would see for quite a while ago. In any event, this year it turns out the car is worth only $25,000 when you sell it. So you get $25,000